Why is it that we usually ignore the fourth dimension? You see, we can move in the other three. As the doctor said, up, down, forwards, backwards, sideways. But when it comes to time, we are prisoners.
Hey, Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
You maniac! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Must be some kind of hot tub time machine.
Hello everyone, Kevin Markwick here again, and welcome to the Lockdown Time Machine, a podcast that I'm making especially just for you, where I ask people way more interesting than me to go back to roughly this time in history and pick out a film or films that were playing at my cinema, the Picture House in Uckfield. I sent everyone I've spoken to a great big spreadsheet with every film over, I think it was April, May and June from 1964 to the present day. It was a very big spreadsheet, and I'm really thankful to everybody that's joined in and had a trawl through it. And as we're currently closed, I wanted to do something to keep us alive in people's minds so they don't forget us, and provide our fans, so to speak, with some entertainment, because there are nothing like enough podcasts in the world. We need way more podcasts than there are. So just for you, here's another one. This week, I talked to radio presenter, producer, writer, documentary maker, Peter Curran. Peter grew up in Belfast and started broadcasting in the early 90s, presenting a show on the BBC station GLR. The show ran for 6 years and featured live performances from the likes of Radiohead, Foo Fighters, and just about everybody else, really. He presented BBC London's The Big Picture and reviewed films for Sight and Sound. Peter's won many awards and gone on to make loads of documentaries for radio and television, too numerous to list here. He's probably best known at the moment for the wonderful Bunk Bed on Radio 4, which he writes and appears in with the playwright Patrick Marber. If you haven't heard it, I suggest you get over to BBC Sounds and download it as a podcast. Make sure you click on the podcast tab, because it's all hiding in there. It's an absolute joy. I first met Peter when he came to my cinema along with Patrick Marber and introduced Martin Scorsese's classic The King of Comedy during our centenary year in 2016. As usual, the talk ended up meandering all over the place, but that's part of the fun, isn't it? I hope you enjoy. I'll speak to you again at the end. Okay. So, yeah, really the first sort of thing, I don't know, we've been talking about is, are people going to come back? Are they coming back to the cinema? Are they? Tell me they are, please.
Oh, they have to. Because cinema's one of those things we're almost hardwired for now, aren't we? You know, that idea that it's ritualistic. I don't want to big you up in a quasi-religious way, Kevin, but there is a certain degree of reverence and kind of sacred cultural engagement when you go to the cinema, and you once the lights go down, then you're in for that other place that you want to head to that's far away from what's outside. So yeah, I don't think people are going to be able to stop themselves. I think in a lot of ways, people probably will use the screen a lot more for staying in touch. Perhaps, if you're going to meet a friend that you would see maybe 3 times a year, and because they don't warrant the hour journey there, hour journey back, maybe half an hour, but you would actually stay in touch with them more often. We can stay in touch with those people who were too lazy to go and see on a regular basis and don't want to spend money on dinner catching up with, but you really like them, and I think that'll happen a lot. But I think maybe we will be much more respectful of places like cinemas and those sort of cultural moments that a communal experience happens, to sound like a two-bit cheap back of the Daily Mirror sociologist.
I like the sound of it. I think I agree with. I endorse this message. Yeah, well, obviously I think so, but and it's really depressing wandering around my cinema with no people in it, and it's quite heartbreaking, to be honest. I have to go and run the projectors every now and again just to sort of keep it all ticking over, and it's horrible. It's meant to echo to the sound of of movies and people laughing and enjoying themselves. I mean, that may sound a little romantic, but that's what it's designed for.
Please tell me you haven't watched Cinema Paradiso during
No.
lockdown.
I can't watch the end of that. I just can't.
Well, I saw it about 10 days ago, and the effect is undimmed, total heart-wrenching.
I have some kind of condition which I'm thinking of getting help for, where I recall films and I start emoting. I just can't stop myself. So if I start to talk about Cinema Paradiso in any meaningful way, I'm sorry, game over.
He's going, folks. He's going.
No, absolutely. If I start to describe the end of Spartacus, it's fatal.
Oh no! Yeah.
If I start to say "I love you, Spartacus," like the father I shall never see, and I start off, I go. It's horrible.
Oh dear! It's only your teenage lust for Gene Simmons that keeps you from entirely breaking down.
I don't know. I think because I don't. Maybe it says yes. Maybe there's something missing in my life. I don't know. I need to.
I think it must be really. I have total sympathy for you, and I think it must be the strangest thing in the world to be walking around your own empty cinema. And do you sit down in the auditorium, or is that a bit too risky emotionally?
No, I do. I'll sit there and we'll put because unfortunately, with the new technological miracle of digital cinema, you can't run a film without a separate digital key, which the distributor owns and will not let you have outside of the licensed running hours.
Oh, okay.
So we can't sit there and watch old films. I've got tons of films on the server, but I can't watch any of them because they won't play.
Wow.
I know. So there's nothing I can run other than, adverts.
Your favourites?
Yes, adverts and trailers. I thought, these are going on a bit. I've suddenly turned into one of my punters. There's 25 minutes of this. What's the matter? When's it ever going to end?
Yeah.
But yes, I find a lot of cinema too much to bear sometimes, which is says something about me. I think I just off I go. I remember reading it was Roger Ebert, I think, said that, and it had never occurred to me before. This is some years ago, that we find cinema emotional, not usually if people are being horrible to one another or suffering, that can be emotional. But actually, what really stirs us is when people love each other in movies. When they say "I love you," that's the bit.
Yes, you just feel all the walls collapsing inside. Yeah.
At the end of Schindler's List, it's when they show him their love for him at the end.
Yeah,
that actually is the release, isn't it? That Spielberg has kind of built up over the last 3 hours for you.
Listen, I don't know about you. I even found going to see films with the kids, ostensibly children's films in the 1990s when they were small. My knuckles were going white on the arms of the chair to stop myself from sobbing because it was almost overwhelming. They were kind of not nearly as caught up in the emotion of the situation as I was.
Well, Toy Story 3 is a very famous film for having this devastating effect on men of a certain age, because the very last is the very last scene where he hands the toys over. Yeah. To the little girl. It's men particularly apparently found that almost unbearable to watch.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt quite detached at that point, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, for and it's obviously that there's a flaw in me somewhere.
You didn't respond in the same way.
No, I became cynical about the cuteness in the face of the little girl that the toys were being given to. And I thought, I was sitting, tutting internally saying, listen, this moment is big enough without you making her so cute. That's what a horrible individual I am.
Well, no, I could see that now, and I think, and often, but often I'm powerless because I mean, I see a lot of movies. You see a lot of movies, and actually, we're all very literate, aren't we? We understand how movies work, and I can sit there and I'll say, "Oh, I know, I can see what you're doing here. Yeah, I know what you're doing. Yeah, you're going to do that, aren't you? And then you're going to do that, and then yeah."
Yes, yeah.
Yes, you did it, you bastard. It kind of, it's almost like it's like a probe going into your, you're powerless against it.
Absolutely, and it's weird. That stuff that you have to keep. Maybe it's all the stuff that we have to keep a lid on in daily life. When you're in that sort of dark room and stuff on the big screen and stuff, it starts to bubble up. There's some kind of you become a bit more porous than you would be, out in the daylight, and your feelings.
It's like a horror movie, isn't it? It's a vicarious way of having that emotion without it presenting you with any jeopardy or any real problem in your life. So you can experience it without it actually causing your wife to get up and go, "What's the matter with you?"
Yeah, I didn't sign up for this blubbering nonsense.
So, yeah, and I actually the one I always use as an example of the most cynical manipulation that just is Hollywood cynical manipulation at its peak. Yet somehow it gets me every bloody time. Is Field of Dreams.
Oh,
and you think, I know what you're doing here. You're absolutely doing this, and not only are you doing it's like tantric blubbing, isn't it? Because it's coming. No,
yeah.
He hasn't said dad yet. No,
yeah.
Withdraw. Hold.
There will be people listening to this that haven't seen Field of Dreams,
yes,
so we should maybe give them a little thumbnail sketch of the moment you're talking about.
Well, it's when he finally, because he suspects you'll start me off. You will start me off.
It's just a baseball movie.
No, but it's the great American metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah.
He builds a baseball field, doesn't he? And all these old baseball players come back. One of which is his father as a young man.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant script writing actually, because the two first words in the entire script are "my father."
Wow.
Which is just, he says, "My father played baseball, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah."
Oh, yeah. Even you've got me going now.
And then right at the end, he says, "Dad," doesn't he? As the ghost of his father effectively is leaving. He goes, "Dad, do you want to play ball?" He's like, "Oh my God."
I know. And, and that's that thing. Not only, it's almost regaining lost time, isn't it? That very thing that haunts us. Time is gone forever, and people that are gone forever. It is incredibly powerful.
It is. But it's cynical as well at the same time. Is it? I don't know. Maybe the writer wasn't being cynical. But...
Are you suggesting that people make movies for money? I certainly hope not.
I am. So we were going to talk about what were we going to talk about? 1980.
Was it 3? I think 1983. Tootsie and the Missionary.
Which is what I've got here. Look, I'll show you, listener. I've got all the books here. Look, I don't know if I've ever shown you these before.
No, wow, aren't they fantastic?
Yeah.
Look at in proper pen. That is a ledger and a half, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is the 1980s, and then I've got the 70s, and we go all the way back to 1964 when we took over here. When I was barely 2 years old. So, but you have a background in cinema, which I don't really know much about. Do tell.
As
an actor, I mean.
As a what?
Well, in the exhibition side of the industry.
I mean. Yeah. My great grandfather opened the first talking cinema in Ireland, a cinema that sold talking pictures. Actually, he opened it in 1916 in Belfast. It was called the Lyceum, and in 1925, I think, a couple of years before, the Jazz Singer, which is cited as the first talking picture, there was a kind of Betamax system of talking pictures. That it was called the DeForest Phono System, and it cost an absolute fortune, and he spent a mint getting this installed. So he was showing kind of half-hour movies, shorts, in 1925 with synchronized sound on them.
Sound, but it wasn't the system that eventually.
It wasn't. It was. I think it was cumbersome. There might have been discs involved.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I had Betamax. I had I had a square reel.
Oh wow!
I invested in BSB as it was at the time.
Did you actually invested in it?
Oh no, not. I mean, I invested in the hardware and bought.
Yeah.
BSB. 1983 sounds. Yeah, here we go. Wow. So the 28th of January, 28th of April. I have to count. I'm still my CSE maths lets me down. I have to count the months. If it says 4, I have to go January, February, March, April.
It took me 3 times to get a C at O-level math, so I'm right there with it on the sort of caveman. Keep it simple.
So what? I mean, that was an enormous grid of movies that I've sent everybody, which is everything in this sort of March, April, April, May, June period from 1964 up to more or less the present day. And I have to say, quite a lot of people are alighting on the early 80s. This seems to be the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've joined the
No,
herd. Let's run to there.
No. That's absolutely fine. I'm sure there's a study we could do about why that. Maybe it's age. Probably is the unifying factor here. But Tootsie and the Missionary, 28th of April 1983, and the Tootsie did really, really well. But we'll start with the Missionary. So that did. We can see it here. So 328 admissions in 7 days.
Oh, that's a bit light.
And it took £499 and 13 pence. So again, my CSE maths is not going to enable me to work out what the price per head was.
And how much would it have cost you and your dad to exhibit that, Kevin?
Missionary was a British film, so they wouldn't have been able to charge excessive terms. So that would have been around 30%, 25 to 35%.
Of the box office, as it were?
Of the net box office after VAT, yeah.
Right, okay.
So, which is why your popcorn's so expensive, because we have to recoup on your sweeties.
If you were if you were a cowboy, you would be called Slim Margins.
Charles Fortescue, missionary, has been called back to London to the polite society he left behind.
All I would ask is that you come dancing with me tonight. Deborah?
To the woman he loved.
Very, very clever girl.
I just want to get married, that's all.
And to the most perilous mission of his career.
How are you with women?
I beg your pardon, sir?
I know you're good with Africans, but how are you with women? Find out why they do what they do and stop them doing it.
Handmade Films presents The Missionary.
All right. Come on.
The story of one man chosen to lead 28 women of the night down the paths of righteousness.
Now then, Reverend, what's your problem?
To succeed in his mission, he will have to pray for more than guidance.
You're a nice-looking fella.
He will have to pray for strength.
Shh, be asleep.
Deborah,
Michael Palin.
you look absolutely marvelous.
I'm Emily, the maid, sir.
Oh,
Maggie Smith.
Agony.
Trevor Howard.
who do I really hate?
Missionaries.
The Missionary. He gave his body to save their souls.
Oh, dear.
But I don't know, when did you last see The Missionary? I'm curious. Have you seen it recently?
Yeah, do you know, I actually watched it before coming on to talk to you.
So did
for
I.
this.
So did I.
Because strangely enough, although I can remember Tootsie almost scene by scene, and know that I absolutely love The Missionary and remember the feelings I had watching it and how lovely and how clever it was and funny, I really did need a refresher.
You didn't?
Oh, I did. I really did need a refresher.
Right.
Yeah, because the individual, I could remember the feelings, but not the scenes.
Right. How did you find it?
I thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought it held up really well.
Yeah, it did.
I was very surprised. I sat through it this morning, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
It was quite not that easy to find. If you want to find it, it's on BFI Player. I don't know how you found it, but
Yeah, I went there too. Yeah.
it seems to be the only place that you can rent it for about £3.50, and the print's a bit weird. It goes with all sorts of strange colours after a while, but
Yes,
generally,
yeah. Maggie Smith's face kind of goes through various.
Yeah.
Well, it changes with her dress.
It does a bit. But so made in 80? Yeah. Oh, we just said it, didn't we? It came out in 1983.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of. I don't know. What do you think? I don't think we'd see a film like that going out in the cinema anymore. Do you?
What a shame that we don't. It's really strange because in the era of these very strangely popular Julian Fellows, faux historical country house dramas, the Missionary has all the kind of richness and English manners. It's done so beautifully. It's styled, it's framed to do justice to those big houses and that decor and that sense of ceremony. And yet you just get these fantastic lines in the script when he's been escorted back after his 10 years in Africa as a missionary, and the father of his putative bride is talking about his wife dying, and the Palin characters commiserating. And the father said, she loved ice skating. And Michael Palin just says really sympathetically, what a shame she didn't learn how to swim. But it's done in that wonderfully kind of straight, respectful way. It's not kind of ba-dum at all. And I thought, gosh, this was actually a very sophisticated piece of work.
I think that's what makes it work, actually, is because it's not a spoof of costume dramas at all.
Yeah.
I don't think they work when they do that, when people affect, except Freddie, you really are the limit, and there's spoofs of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Not a spoof at all. It's actually got its own agenda, I think. It's actually a sort of gentle kind of rebuke to that class, isn't it? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, and general kind of a British hypocrisy and sense of morality. But
I love that line. What is it? Denham Elliott says, "Find out what they do and stop them from doing it." He's not even entirely sure what it is. He just knows that they should stop it. But I suppose we did slightly describe the plot, which is about a missionary in, about 1902, 1903.
Yeah.
Back from Africa. And he's going to marry the vicar's daughter. Well, he's a priest himself. Do they call him a priest, I suppose?
A curate, perhaps, maybe? I don't know. Well, I didn't hear the... he's got a very thick collar. Yes. Not the usual kind of micro collar that's sported by Catholic priests of the time.
But it's Michael Palin doing his. It recalls Sir Galahad, doesn't it? From Holy Grail, I think. That kind of terribly slightly sort of apologetic, slightly embarrassed by everything, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I suppose something that he went on to develop with Ripping Yarns, the TV series he did with Terry Jones.
Yeah, definitely a big whiff of Ripping Yarns in it, but it so he then gets set up in this. He's supposed to help fallen women, isn't he? In this.
That's right. A fantastic turn as the Bishop of London by Denham Elliott, who runs a sort of homoerotic boxing gym for
fantastic
for young men. He likes seeing punch each other.
I know. I do like to see young boys boxing with each other or something. He says, and everything's a sort of cricket analogy, isn't it? I'm going to pull you a bit of a tricky one now, which is very Palin, very, very Michael Palin. But it looks glorious. It looks beautiful, the whole film.
Yeah, it does.
By Richard Loncraine, who I think is one of our underrated sort of workman-like directors in British cinema.
Mm.
Who did things like Wimbledon, didn't he? And other films.
Yeah. Well, we don't have time to go into that now, sadly. But
Richard III. But yeah, and it's I suppose, and that brilliant scene where everyone's terribly embarrassed because the old boy's died, which seems like very bad manners to die in the middle of a conversation.
Well, it's actually Palin's making his kind of loud pitch because the added comedy that he has been informed by his wife that he's a bit deaf, so he's roaring this appeal for funds for the fallen women, and the guy just dies during this tedious rant by Michael Palin. The great sort of comic, physical comedy that's happening at the time is that, he dies, the doctor is called, his body is taken out of the room, all without interrupting Michael Palin's appeal for funds.
Breach the barriers of ignorance.
Mr. Fortescue.
And smash the barriers of... Yes?
I'm awfully sorry, but my husband has died.
Died?
Yes, you know, his heart has ceased to...
Yes, I... Oh, dear.
I'm terribly sorry, because he would have loved to have heard what you were saying.
Oh, no, I'm the one who should be sorry. I do apologize.
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Fortescue. These things happen, and he has had a jolly good innings.
I'm most frightfully sorry. I shall be going.
Oh, no, it's I who should be sorry.
Oh, no,
it was really a breach of manners, because he's very forgetful, and he probably forgot you were there.
Well, I think when one's dying, one does tend to become forgetful.
He's never done it before.
No, it is wonderful. And actually, the other thing which I thought was quite interesting was the chemistry between Palin and Maggie Smith. I thought was brilliant.
Yeah,
I thought exceptionally good. Actually, I mean, she was quite saucy, even in the scenes when she's supposed to be the lady, whatever it is. It's quite saucy. I thought the way she delivered those lines was quite. Yeah, I'm going to say the word saucy again because it's a good word.
Yeah, but particularly, and you're just about out of the 70s, so why wouldn't you say saucy? 1983 is perfect.
Well, I don't know, because actually, as I was watching it, I was thinking in an odd sort of way, this is like a very posh Carry On film in a way.
Yes.
Because it's doing all of the thing. There's the sort of terror of actual sex. And all of those things, the sort of sexual terror and the sort of moral equivalence all the time, and how and actually it's just like a really posh Carry On movie. In an odd
that's really interesting, and the character that Michael Hordern plays, the totally incompetent butler who keeps getting lost. I mean, that's the other delight about seeing is you just say, oh God, it's class. Trevor Howard, Denham Elliott, and Michael Hordern as the forgetful butler, who comes into the bedroom at one point as the latest example of him going to the wrong place at the wrong time, starts to get undressed while Michael Palin is under the bedclothes with the lady of the house played by Maggie Smith. There's an innocence about it that and a sort of decency about it. You're right, it has its own little moral universe there. So it's not... there's a kind of strong message of sort of love and tolerance, as well as, deep silliness behind it, isn't there?
But it doesn't overplay the silliness. That's the thing. It's right.
No.
Which is what makes it work. But no, I actually enjoyed it. And 86 minutes. I mean, come on. We need more 86-minute films, don't we? But it did... it cost £2 million to make and made 7.2 million at the box office. So this is what Handmade did. They started off really well, and they made all these great films like Long Good Friday and The Missionary, and then Palin did another one, didn't he, with Maggie Smith, which was the Alan Bennett thing,
Private Function. Yeah,
which was great. Get your foot off my car, because he's a chiropodist, isn't he? He's got the big foot. Oh, the thing I remember about Private Function is the trailer, which was narrated by... The trailer voiceover was done by Alan Bennett. And the last bit in the trailer, it's always stuck with me. I still use it now when people... I quote films, is... come early to avoid getting a seat by the toilet.
Brilliant.
Which is great. But then they did this thing British cinema has often done, where they think, we're doing really well here, we can rule the world. And then they made Shanghai Surprise with Madonna and
Sean Penn.
Oh, and all
what
the
a stinker.
Yeah. Which cost 17 million to make.
Wow.
Which in 1984 or whatever it was just a stupid amount of money for a British production company who'd been doing really well, making small, entertaining, reasonably successful British films, which presumably the broadcasters had money in as well, I would think. Channel 4 or the BBC or somebody for their license fee. So everybody was doing very well. Thank you very much, British cinema. And then, oh no, we're going to do this big thing because we want to rule the world.
Well, it's funny. I suppose it's a well-worn path, isn't it? I'm just thinking of Aardman as well, and their unhappy relationship with the big studios when they got involved and ended up retreating back to where they were comfortable.
Yep, Goldcrest did it, didn't they? I can't remember what the film was that ruined them. They did well with Gandhi, and then something happened to them. I can't remember what it was. And of course, famously, Palace Pictures, who thought they did the similar thing. Great little British films, Company of Wolves and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting films. And then they made Absolute Beginners, which completely sunk them. It cost all this money, and it completely sunk them. And the film that would have saved them, which was
Crying Game.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just thinking it was Withnail and I was
Withnail
handmade as well, wasn't it?
That was Withnail. They made 23 films actually in the end. Time Bandits, I think, was their most financially successful, which was a tremendous piece of work.
But if you read some of Bruce Robinson's reflections on making Withnail and I, there was, a lot of pressure on them by, I'm trying to remember George Harrison's partner.
It was O'Brien, wasn't it?
Dennis O'Brien.
Dennis O'Brien, yeah.
Who kind of quailed at some of the ideas and the scenes in Withnail and I, thinking, this is going to be box office death. I mean, he was only half wrong, but certainly not with the quality. Yeah.
No, it wasn't a massive hit, but it did well enough, and is the most quotable film probably in cinema history, possibly. And gets funnier actually every time. I think it does get funnier every time you see it. Are you a fan of Withnail?
Oh, I absolutely love it. I love it. I mean, even though, as you kind of get older and see more and more films, you realise that structurally it's all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. But as a sort of collection of absolutely brilliant scenes, superbly acted and scripted, there's very little to touch it, isn't there?
Do you like vegetables? I've always been fond of root crops, but I only started to grow last summer. I happen to think the cauliflower more beautiful than the rose.
Chin-chin.
Do you grow?
Geraniums.
Oh, you little traitors. I think the carrot infinitely more fascinating than the geranium. The carrot has mystery. Flowers are essentially tarts. Prostitutes for the bees. There is, you will agree, a certain je ne sais quoi, very special about a firm young carrot. Excuse me. Do help yourselves another drink.
But then they, because they also financed Robinson's follow-up. I don't know if you've ever seen that, called How to Get Ahead in Advertising.
Oh, this is Richard E. Grant again, wasn't it?
Yeah, where he has this giant boil on the side of his neck that talks to him.
Yeah.
It was never going to be a commercial success, was it? It's a difficult sell, let's be honest. So, and then the other film from that particular date, 1983, Tootsie, that's a whole other game of whatever. So that did, this was week number. Now, so we were beginning to run films for a long time at that point. It's a bit difficult to explain without being really, really boring about it. But really, through the 60s and 70s, films only played 7 days. That's all they did.
Right.
And they needed more business. They came back, which you could do.
Okay. Right.
There wasn't television. There wasn't video. There was, there was television, but films were years old.
Yeah.
I remember being very excited in the early 80s because Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid had finally arrived on BBC One.
Yeah.
It took a long time.
And I suppose, there was on Saturday afternoons, in the 70s, BBC Two would have a lot of old Hollywood. So we got to see lots of great, Hollywood noir stuff from the 30s and 40s, but stuff that people would be no market for in the cinema. But thank goodness we got that little bit of education early on.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a real shame that we don't see old film. I mean, Sunday afternoon was the only thing to do, wasn't it? There was nothing else to do other than to watch Mildred Pierce on BBC.
I remember seeing Double Indemnity and as a kid and going, oh my God. I assumed that all films would be as good as this and as kind of emotionally terrifying.
Well, my mother had a thing for the big Warner Brothers melodrama, so we had Mildred Pierce and Random Harvest and all those kind of, Greer Garson.
Yeah.
But Tootsie had run so we'd been playing Gandhi for 4 weeks, which is unheard of. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So a film would play for 7 days. he never thought, what the phrase we use now is a holdover. You say, well, we'll hold it over. Well, nobody held films over. They just didn't, because you had a monthly program, and it was all in the monthly program. And if it took a lot of money, you went, well, that took a lot of money. Maybe we'll bring it back. You didn't think, I've got to hold on to this to milk it for as long as I can.
Yeah, and push other stuff out of the way, I guess.
No, it didn't happen. And also, there were less actual physical copies of the film in those days.
Right.
So, there were 30, 40 prints, and they would make their way around the country. So there'd be a North London release, a South London release, a Midlands release, a Scottish release, and everyone had to have their time. So a film would take ages to get around the country. I mean, inconceivable today. But by the early 80s, we were starting to run films for multi-weeks, and Gandhi was one of them that came in before that. But Tootsie was massive, absolutely massive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, which in 1983 was pretty much unheard of. And the week of the 28th of April, and this is the other tragedy. I'm not tragedy. The shame, I'm not shame. There's a better word, but anyway, we had 864 admissions in that week.
Great.
And it filled up every single night because we were once nightly. We just showed the film once nightly. That was it.
Okay.
And so there was no opportunity for a film that big
to do late night or something.
Or 6 o'clock even.
Of course, yes.
6 and 8 we'd have filled twice, but no, it was once nightly. That was it. The building was open from 7:30 at night till 11 at night. That was it. The rest of the time, the entire building was unused. It always struck me as slightly odd. It was.
Did you ever have a discussion with them about it?
Oh yeah, because we had to preserve costs. We had to save money because also, to be fair, 1983 is just about on the cusp of the lowest point of admissions in the UK ever, which was 1984 when we hit 50 million admissions, or 49.8 or something million admissions in a year. When you consider in 1948 there was 1,000 million admissions.
Wow, yeah. Was that the place when suddenly cinemas became carpet warehouses and so forth, didn't it?
That was all happening all the way through the 70s and into the 80s. And bingo, obviously, was the other thing, wasn't it? I mean, bingo halls are now being turned back into cinemas, hilariously. But, bingo was the thing. And but they were these barns, and they were horrible places to go, a lot of them, weren't they? I mean, to be honest.
Yeah.
Odeon and ABC had cut these things up into horrible orange painted boxes, and they weren't pleasant. I mean,
and you could hear, that was the thing, you could hear the soundtrack of a film you'd ever already seen coming through to one you were watching, and so half of your mind was imagining this kind of love scene or terrible fight, while your eyes were seeing what was currently in front of you, which was something entirely unrelated.
Yeah, no, it was horrible. It was actually 84 was the turning point, because that's when AMC came over and they built the Point at Milton Keynes, the first multiplex in the UK. So it was the Americans came over in 84, and that was the turning point. So we'd hit the low point, and then when they opened the multiplex in Milton Keynes, it started to go the other way, and people started to build multiplexes. So we were here right in the deep, dark horribleness, but this film Tootsie was a bit of a bright spot. So it was full up. And it's got to be one of the most perfect scripts ever written, hasn't it? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's up there with When Harry Met Sally, I think, and not dissimilar in the sense that there's no flab on it at all.
Nope.
It's just fantastically paced, but every line is a winner and serves a purpose. And some of the characterizations are a bit dated now. I suppose the TV producer who's leching after the Jessica Lange character and treats her really badly. Actually, I'm going to revise my opinion. No, actually, it is perfect. It's right, because that is the way that executives treated women in those days.
That's what it would have been like in 1984. So I think it's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
And he'd made a bit of a career, Dabney Coleman, out of doing that. He'd done it a couple of years before in 9 to 5, very similar sort of a character. And I always think it's one of the it's like a machine. It's like a Rolls Royce of a script. It sort of it clicks and whirs so agreeably.
Yeah.
I mean, whether audiences sit and watch it like that, I doubt they do.
Let's hope not. You'd be out of business quickly. What a joyless night out, appreciating the tiny nuances.
Yeah, well, I was in 1984. I was 22 years old. So actually, in April 1983, I'd have been 20 years old. Actually, 20 years old. I was 21 in 83. But it was when I really first started to be able to articulate what it was like for an audience. And because I was in the projection box, I showed it every night, and I would deliberately go in to the theatre every night and stand at the back and watch that sequence when he comes down the stairs, the live sequence. It's a perfect example of how cinema works, and only cinema works, because Pollack had and Hoffman have you in the palm of their hands, and they're not letting you go. It's an extraordinary moment, and what makes it so joyful is the audience, which you can never replicate at home. You really can't, and you could feel the palpable tension because it was a full house, and as he comes down the stairs. And you can feel this tension in the audience. It's extraordinary, and he starts to rip his eyelashes off and say, "For I'm not Emily Kimberly. No, I'm not.
I'm her brother,
brother Dwayne." And there was this almighty explosion in you could hear a pin drop, and then chaos reigned. It was just extraordinary. This release of tension from the audience was palpable. It was amazing, and you never heard that brilliant line that the old boy says about, "Does Jeff know?" People were still laughing. And
wow.
It was,
and Jeff was the lecherous old doctor. He was always trying to kiss.
But Jeff is his flatmate, isn't it? Bill Murray is Jeff.
Oh God, beg your pardon. Of course, yeah.
And the old boy,
even better.
He was trying to get Dorothy to have a snog with Dorothy.
Oh, that's
and he turns up at the flat, doesn't he, to find Bill Murray there, and he's rather put out. So when he reveals himself to actually be a man, his first response is, "Does Jeff know?"
He fears for poor Jeff. Do you know? It's so fantastic because it gives the it is a wonderful It's a wonderful commentary on the relationships between men and women at that time, and sort of expectations. And it was almost, it was roles within roles, and I think that was, as you say, that big liberating laugh, guffaw when Dustin Hoffman pulls off the wig and reveals that he's a man pretending to be a female actress in this daily sitcom. The whole film is full of stuff. The fact that Jessica Lange's father falls in love with Dustin Hoffman as the woman, and has some very lovely tender scenes, but at the same time you can just see the fear in Dustin Hoffman's eyes as this guy genuinely falling in love and realizing there's going to be a terrible reckoning. This is not going to end well. Aside from that jeopardy, I think Sidney Pollack is just superb at bringing that sort of the neediness of the performer wanting work, and I guess we all relate to that thing. Just kind of, why will no one let me do what I want to do?
Margaret, get him back, will you? I cut myself off. Now, what is it, Michael?
Terry Bishop is doing Iceman Cometh, right? Didn't you promise to send me up for that part? Am I wrong? Didn't you tell me I was gonna get a reading for that part? Aren't you my agent too?
Stuart Pressman wants a name, Michael.
Oh, I see. Terry Bishop is a name.
No. Michael Dorsey is a name. When you want to send a steak back, Michael Dorsey is a name. Okay. Wait. You always do this to me. That was a rotten thing to say, and I know it. Let me start all over again. Terry Bishop is on a soap opera. Millions of people watch him every day. He's known.
And that qualifies him to ruin Iceman Cometh? You know I can act circles around that guy. I already played that part in Minneapolis.
Stuart Pressman wants a name, that's his affair, okay? I know this is going to disgust you, Michael, but a lot of people are in this business to make money.
Well, don't make me out like I'm some flake, George. I am in this business to make money, too.
Really?
Yes.
Harlem Theater for the Blind, Strindberg in the Park, the People's Workshop in Syracuse.
Okay, now wait a minute. I did 9 plays in 8 months up at Syracuse. I happen to get great reviews from the New York critics. Not that that's why I did it.
Of course not. God forbid you should lose your standing as a cult failure.
You think I'm a failure, George? Is that what you're saying to me?
I will not get sucked into this conversation, Michael. Okay. I will not.
Okay, look, I sent you a play to read that my roommate wrote. It had a great part in it for me. Did you read it?
Where the hell do you come off sending me your roommate's play for you to star in? I'm your agent, not your mother. I'm not supposed to find plays for you to star in. I'm supposed to field offers, and that's what I do.
Field offers? Who told you that? The agent Ferry? That was a significant piece of work. I could have been terrific in that play.
Michael, nobody's going to do that play.
Why?
Because it's a downer, that's why. Because nobody wants to produce a play about a couple that moved back to Love Canal.
But that actually happened.
Who gives a shit? Nobody wants to pay $20 to watch people living next to chemical waste. They can see that in New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, what side of a brain must have Sidney Pollack have had to be able to just be so kind of commanding in all parts of that film?
Is the word exactly right? It's commanding. No one will hire you. You know, what about the cut? No, we went 3 days over because you wouldn't sit down. But I was a tomato. Tomatoes don't sit down. That's what I told them. You know, and it has that brilliant line he says about I was a better man with you as a woman than I was as a man. I just thought, you know, it's kind of cheesy, isn't it? But it's wonderful.
It is, and I mean the other Bill Murray is superb as the sort of flatmate who's kind of us in a way, looking at the ridiculousness of what Dustin Hoffman's attempting to do. Yes. And Terry Garr is absolutely brilliant. I mean, what a cast! They're all just. Yeah. Who else would you want in your comedy?
On the top of their game as well.
Yeah,
and you know that again. It's a line. Sadly, all the pithy things I say are from films. It's kind of sad, isn't it?
Hazards of the job, Kevin, I'd say.
But it's a truism when she says, you know, I just have to feel like this until I don't feel like this anymore. Which is a great...
Oh, it's brilliant.
But no, she's wonderful, Terry Garr. We actually sat through Young Frankenstein the other night. She's hilarious in that as well.
Oh, she's really good. I've seen there's some nice outtakes of her and Gene Wilder in from Young Frankenstein trying to cope with Marty Feldman.
Yes.
Upstaging them wildly. Like biting into Madeline Kahn's fur while she's standing at the front door as the rich returning wife.
Yes, Madeline. Oh yeah, the get the bags. Okay, you take the blonde, I'll take the one
in the toy bin. Yeah, because I think he improvised that, so he did, I believe.
Yes.
He went into Groucho's.
But yeah, so that was Tootsie is a film I can watch pretty much any time. Yeah. Even that cheesy song in it, which is, you know, it's okay.
You know, the other thing about Tootsie is one of those films that, and this is, you know, speaking as a middle-aged man with kids who are getting ever older.
Yes.
From an early age, I was able to sit and watch that with, 4 and 5 year olds who absolutely loved it. Yeah. Okay. I mean, they didn't get, a lot of sort of, the sexual currents that adults would, but they just loved it had as much sort of emotional heft for them as Toy Story.
Yes. Okay. No, I can see that. It's from the heart, I believe. I think it's an honest and from the heart film.
Yeah.
I was just going to look at very quickly. You said about 1960. What was the other one you said? 67.
Oh yeah.
Which was a week where we did Good, the Bad. No, it couldn't have been 1967. It must have been 1977.
Oh, was it? Yes, they were re-releases our second time around as your parents. Wow. You know the temptation, Kevin, when you said, "Oh, I'm going to send you over a spreadsheet of every week and all these fantastic films." It does appeal to the inner pretentiousness, or maybe the outer pretentiousness, right. Because suddenly you think, well, no, I'll talk about something that very art house, and I can unfold the nuances, and then you think, no, let's just do really great films like Tootsie and The Missionary.
How about this for a week? I'm sorry, I'm going to go off at a tangent here, but how about this for a week? In 1974, April the 14th, 4 days on Italian Job and Monte Carlo or Bust. 3 days on Airport with 2 Mules for Sister Sarah.
Wow.
And then Thursday, Friday and Saturday afternoons, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That's a fantastic
week. What about that? Wow.
I'd go and see all those films now.
I know, but
really.
was that only 3 or 4 days per film?
Yeah. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Italian Job, which always did really well. Now, we were only one screen then, so we had 310 seats.
Okay, gotcha.
But, so April, so it was probably Easter. So you had Willy Wonka for 3 matinees. That was all. And then I do remember sitting in the circle watching Airport and Two Mules for Sister Sarah. But Italian Job, we had 180 admissions on Sunday, then 268, 185, 246. Now, this is 1974. How old is the Italian Job? By 1974, it's like 1968 or something, isn't it?
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And, actually, funnily enough, it is a bit of an outlier because we played it again about a year ago, maybe 2, and we had to put it on 2 screens. Would you believe?
Really?
Yeah, well, we sort of tied it in with that Michael Caine documentary, the My Generation.
Oh, yeah.
And then with the Italian Job as well.
Do you think that the Italian Job has become a little bit like We'll Meet Again, or one of those? Maybe it just becomes a slightly ritualistic thing to go and see, because it is a bit creaky.
It does creak a bit, and actually, it does. It does. I agree with you, but it's still a moment in time, isn't it? I think that's the thing about it.
Yeah.
Certainly for British cinema, it's a moment in time. For one brief moment, we felt like we were on top of the world.
Yes, we could do thrilling stunts on roofs with lots of cars.
Yeah. But the swinging 60s, I can't find this anywhere this week.
Yeah. It's funny now that you say that, though, about because of sort of the ambition of it and the fact that it was abroad, how glamorous, and the before vehicles we had seen were just kind of those woolsies, black woolsies with police in pursuit after criminals,
with the bells ringing on them.
I remember my the reason my great-grandfather, then grandfather, they sort of went out of business was because their cinemas in Belfast and the surrounding areas wouldn't show films that were they considered risque.
Oh.
And I mean, he was kind of, given that he was born in the late 1800s, and so found himself owning cinemas in the 1930s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and he had a very whereas he would show these, Gainsborough pictures would be as racy as he would get, with women with lots of Victorian dresses and things like that.
They were quite racy, actually.
Oh, were they?
Oh, yeah. Well, they were body
Gainsborough, cool.
Yeah, no. Well, there was a whole slew of bodice rippers, they were called.
Oh, really? Well, that wouldn't have been him then. Yeah,
heaving bosoms. Margaret Lockwood and James Mason. I mean, real kind of.
Yes.
Real horrible sort of misogynistic slapping women down stuff.
Yeah.
In it. And they made a fortune out of those Gainsborough pictures with a lady at the beginning that would tip her hat.
That's right. Yeah, but and some of them were filmed in Lime Grove, the old BBC Lime Grove series, weren't they? But anyway, just the long and short of it was that his insistence on not moving with the times meant that fewer and fewer people came to see their films, and they sold out to the dreaded rank in the end.
Yes.
For not very much money. Well, one of the reasons why we moved down to Sussex from West London was because your cinema was there, and we thought, isn't that gorgeous? We are sorted. We might be living nominally in the countryside, but look at this beautiful turn of the century cinema that we can go along to, and the programme was a mix of mainstream entertainment and high quality art house. So we would
nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's survived against all the odds. I just hope it survives this. That's the thing. It's it's never quite had to put. We've never had this. Well, obviously, no one's had this before. Well, apart from what was it? The flu epidemic of whatever it was. Presumably that closed cinemas. I don't know.
What, 1918 or whatever, the Spanish flu? Yeah.
Possibly. 1918, though. Yeah. The only time cinemas were closed for the first week of World War II, and that's the only time subsequently that they've been closed. That was it.
Just for a week?
Yeah, they suddenly realized, hang on a minute. Fred and circuses. Yeah. We can't have the populace running around without Clark Gable or, what was her name? Up north. Oh, jeez. Jesse.
Or Jesse. I beg your pardon. You're thinking
Jesse
about Toy
Matthews.
Story. Oh, Jesse Matthews. Right. Fantastic. Play us out with a bit of Mrs. Mills.
Yeah, she was a huge star, Jessie Matthews.
Yes, she was, wasn't she?
That was in the days when you could make a film that could recoup in the northeast of England only. Can you imagine?
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it didn't matter what it did in Surrey. It was the dark satanic mills were of no interest to them. It was all up in the northeast.
I suppose that was because people just went in their legions, didn't they?
Well, they went. It didn't matter what was on. They went on a Wednesday and a Saturday, whatever, and that's what it was.
Yeah,
and that's why cinemas were so big. My old man used to go, well, they built them big to get me in on Saturday night. That's what they did.
Yeah.
And the idea that you queued outside and waited for a seat to become free. You tell the kids of today that. Okay, well, it's been a lovely chat. Thank you very much. I sounded a bit Alan Partridge then, didn't I? It was a lovely chat.
Not Alan Partridge enough, sadly. No, Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved catching up with you, and I could do it for many hours talking about the joy of cinema, and particularly with somebody who's kind of got movies in his blood and has done the proper from knee high to the projectionist right up to the present day. So and I so hope that people come back in their droves and the Uckfield cinema is held aloft and polished as the jewel that it is again. So,
well, thank you very much. It's very kind. Thank you, Peter. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. And thanks again to Peter for being so generous with his time during this difficult period. Really, really appreciated. A few loose ends to tie up because I, as usual, veered all over the show, pulling dates out of my bottom. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly week I was looking for was the 24th of April, 1977. It was a week that also included One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Again, they were both old films then, particularly The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, which was 11 years old, having been made in 1966. The Italian Job was made in 1969, but you probably knew that. And the film that sunk Goldcrest, of course, was Revolution in 1985. Hugh Hudson's massive critical and commercial flop, costing $28 million to make and grossing under $1 million in the US. The experience was so traumatic that Al Pacino gave up acting in films for over 4 years. Wow. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Peter. Do drop me a line at Kevin Markwick on Twitter, or you can get me on podcast at picturehouseupford.com. I'd love to hear from you. Also, like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And I'll see you next time. Play us out, Mrs. Mills.